Picture a young man in 1955, aged 23, with a steady job and a simple dream. A house of his own by his late 20s, a backyard for kids to run free, summers by the sea, and a pension that promises dignity in old age. For a generation of Australians, this was not ambition. It was the ordinary deal: one income, one life, fully paid for. Today, the maths behind that promise has vanished. If a worker like Tom could once buy a home for 4 years' pay and raise a family on a single wage, why do two incomes now barely get by? To understand how an entire system of security unravelled, we need to start where the numbers really worked. Tom's week began with the steady rhythm of a single pay packet. In 1955, at 23, he worked as a fitter at the local rail yards, clocking off each Friday with a paper envelope in hand. That envelope meant more than wages. It was the ticket to a life mapped out in quiet confidence. By his late 20s, Tom and his wife moved into a modest weatherboard home on the edge of town, a quarter-acre block, a Hills hoist spinning in the breeze, the scent of fresh-cut grass drifting through the kitchen window. On weekends, neighbours leaned over fences, sharing cuttings and stories. Tom's children walked to the local school, shoes scuffed from backyard cricket, their lunchboxes filled with sandwiches and apples from the tree out back. Holidays meant packing the Holden and driving to the coast. No bookings, just a cabin by the beach, the same one each year. There was a sense of order. The mortgage was paid down bit by bit. Groceries were bought with change left over for a treat, and a pension waited at the end of working life. Tom never wondered if one wage would be enough. It was simply the way things worked. An ordinary promise, quietly kept, shaping the hopes of a whole generation. The arithmetic behind that certainty was invisible, but its results filled streets with new houses, parks with young families, and Sunday tables with the comfort of knowing tomorrow would look much like today. In 1970, the arithmetic behind Tom's quiet certainty was simple enough to scribble on the back of an envelope. The median house cost about 4 times the average annual wage. A single pay packet, like Tom's, could cover the mortgage, groceries, bills, and still leave room for savings or a holiday at the coast. Banks, tightly regulated, offered fixed-rate home loans at around 5 or 6%. Lending rules capped how much a family could borrow, and repayments rarely swallowed more than a quarter of one income. There was no expectation that both adults would need to work just to keep a roof overhead. Education opened doors without locking young people into decades of debt. University was free from 1974, and even before that, fees were low enough that a summer job could cover the cost. Public schools were well funded, and healthcare, soon to be universal, meant a broken arm or a sick child did not threaten the family's finances. Defined benefit pensions, common in both public and private sectors, promised a steady income in retirement, usually pegged to a worker's final salary. The system was built to deliver security, not just for the privileged few, but for anyone with a steady job and the patience to pay off a modest home. This was not luck or accident. It was the result of deliberate policy, strong unions negotiating wages that kept pace with productivity, governments investing in public housing, and a tax system that asked more from those who earned the most. For Tom, and millions like him, the numbers worked because the rules were designed to make them work. The promise was ordinary, but it was engineered to last. In the space of a single generation, the arithmetic behind an ordinary Australian life began to unravel. 3 shocks, each distinct, struck the system that once made single income security feel inevitable. In August 1971, the world's currencies were unmoored from gold. The Bretton Woods Agreement, an anchor since 1944, collapsed when the United States ended the dollar's convertibility. Without fixed exchange rates, inflation gathered pace. Australia's dollar, once stable, lost nearly a quarter of its value in 2 years. Prices across the board began to climb, quietly but relentlessly. Then, in late 1973, oil-producing nations cut supply. Petrol queues snaked down city blocks. The price of crude quadrupled almost overnight. For Australian families, the cost of filling the car doubled in less than 2 years. Groceries and goods followed suit as transport and production costs rippled through every aisle and shelf. Annual inflation soared above 15% by 1974. Wages tried to keep up, but pay packets could not match the speed of rising bills. The certainty that yesterday's money would cover tomorrow's needs began to slip away. The final shock arrived in the 1980s, not with a bang, but through a series of quiet reforms. Banks, once tightly leashed, were set loose. The Australian dollar floated in 1983, opening the floodgates to global capital. New banks sprang up, lending rules softened, and credit poured into the housing market. Home loans that once required careful saving now stretched further, bidding up prices. From 1983 to 1989, Sydney house prices more than doubled, while average wages lagged far behind. What had been a system designed for stability became one driven by speculation and volatility. The numbers that once worked for families like Tom's no longer added up. Each shock layered on the next, reshaping what an ordinary life would cost and what it would take to secure it. Maya is 34, works full-time as a nurse, and shares a rented townhouse in Melbourne's outer suburbs. Her partner, also working, clocks in long shifts as a delivery driver. Their combined income, about $120,000 a year, sounds solid on paper. But when Maya runs the numbers, the shape of her life looks nothing like Tom's. The median house nearby now sells for over $900,000, more than 7 times their combined annual earnings, and nearly 14 times what Maya could buy on her own. In the 1970s, a single wage covered a home loan with room to spare. Today, even 2 incomes barely scrape together a deposit. Groceries tell the same story. That $20 a week basket from 1970, including meat, bread, milk, and fruit enough to fill the pantry, now costs upwards of $300, even before counting school lunches or fresh produce. The supermarket receipt stretches longer each month, and there is rarely much left for treats or holidays. Education, once a ladder to security, now comes with a price tag that lingers for years. Maya finished her nursing degree with a HECS help debt of $28,000, repaid over 10 years as her wages slowly rose. For her parents' generation, university was free or nearly so. For Maya and her peers, it is a bill that waits quietly in the background, indexed to inflation. That debt shapes choices for years. Buying a first home now happens, if at all, around age 36, a full decade later than in Tom's day. Maya's friends talk about saving for a deposit as if it is a second job. Some have moved back in with parents. Others give up altogether, resigning themselves to renting indefinitely. The arithmetic that once made a single income enough has been rewritten, line by line, until the old promise no longer adds up. For decades, the promise of security rested on a foundation built by policy, not luck. In the 1960s, more than half of Australian workers belonged to a union, bargaining for wages that rose alongside productivity. The tax code asked more from those at the top, helping fund public goods that reached into every suburb, including public housing, free schooling, and affordable healthcare. State governments built thousands of brick and tile homes, letting families move in with a small deposit, and pay rent set well below market rates. Defined benefit pensions guaranteed a steady income in retirement, tied to years of service rather than the swings of the market. In 1992, the superannuation guarantee shifted retirement savings onto individuals, linking futures to investment returns instead of a promised payout. Each policy, whether bolstering or unwinding security, was a choice. shaping who could count on a fair go and who would be left to weather the risks alone. Tom's world was built on the expectation that each generation would do a little better than the last. For Maya, that promise feels out of reach. In the 1980s, more than half of Australians under 35 owned a home. Today, it's barely 1 in 3. The lines have shifted so far that what once seemed ordinary, buying a house and raising a family on one wage, now feels outlandish. The numbers don't lie, the price of entry has changed, and the path that worked for Tom is closed to many like Maya, no matter how hard they work or how carefully they save. There's no single answer to what's owed between generations, or how to balance gratitude for what was built with frustration at what's been lost. But the question remains, in a country as wealthy as Australia, what do we owe each other when the old arithmetic no longer adds up? Today, the average Australian home costs over 8 times the median income, more than double the ratio in the 1970s. What was once ordinary now feels out of reach by design, not by chance. The question is no longer how hard we work, but what kind of future we choose to build together.